All right, we'll go ahead and call our meeting to order. We have a quorum. It is 2 o'clock. First order of business is approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to look over the minutes? Anyone have any changes or suggested edits? None? All right, I would happily entertain a motion to accept the minutes as written.
So moved.
Any
Second.
seconds? Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, please raise your hands or say aye. Great, minutes approved. Next up, I will turn it over to our Inspector General for an update.
Thank you. I know that we have a really busy schedule, so I'm just going to try to be really quick. I don't have my clicker, so can I just say click and thank you so much. So just giving you an update. So one of the things I wanted to just go over, there were some questions that the board has been asking. So I just wanted to quickly go over the citizens' complaint information. Then I want to talk a little bit about the citizens' complaint data, talk about what our monthly stats are today, what our year-to-year stats are. There were some questions regarding the IEG investigations, cases of allegations, based on what the board has reviewed, what they agree, disagree with, or had alternative recommendations. And also there was an asked about the chain of commands review. So all of this information was gathered and is going to be provided. And then at the end, any questions. So one of the things I just really wanted to say, and I'm glad that citizens are listening, and that is Citizen Review Board. So the Citizens Review Board website, and right now the city has is making some changes, so we don't have anything on our website that we're able to change, but we are constantly updating the Citizens Review Board. So the monthly agenda is posted monthly, so citizens can get that monthly agenda. As you can already see, it has the list of the cases that will be reviewed. It also has a list of cases that are coming up. The minutes are also posted on the review board's site, so citizens, if they want to know whether or not their case has been heard, they're able to review the minutes, and they're also able to get that information as to what the board approved, or whether they approve, or whether that was heard on. That's also in the minutes, and that's also available for citizens. When the complaint is closed, we send a letter out to the complainant, and that's if they provide us contact information, because a lot of times, some cases we close, complainants do not provide us contact information, but if we do have their address or email, even when we make a phone call, we let them know that the case has been closed. We let them know that it's going to the review board, to the Citizens Review Board, for them to be able to for the board to be able to review that. Also, the citizens also have the investigators' contact information. Investigators, at the beginning of any complaint that they're investigating, contact the complainant and let the complainant know that they're the investigator that's handling the investigation. They provide their number, they provide their email address. So the complainant, at all steps of their complaint, have access to be able to obtain any information that they need regarding their complaint, from the beginning to when it's end. And then if they want to find out whether or not the board is looking at their complaint or whether it's been reviewed, all of that is posted. So I wanted to just not only reiterate that to the board, but also for citizens that are listening and saying, how can they obtain this information, for them to be able to know that this information is available, and it's available on the Citizens Review Board website. We will be updating our website once we're able to, but right now, again, I would just want to say the city is kind of in the process of redoing the different websites for all departments. So going forward, looking at where we are right now, so all of the citizen complaints as of September, we have received, for the month of September, we've received 192 complaints. Out of those 192 complaints, 169 were closed. Those were complaints that were closed that were not open into investigations. 24 of the complaints that we received were open into an investigation. For the month of September, we closed 30 investigations, and 28 complaints are still pending. Still pending is because a lot of times we get complaints and complainants have not provided all the information we need to make a determination as to whether or not we can open it up into an investigation, or if we have sufficient information to be able to identify who they may be alleging the officer is. So sometimes those are still pending, and that's just pending going into the month of October. From January the 1st to September the 30th, we have received 1,483 complaints. 144 of those complaints were closed, were not open in 2 investigations. To this date, we have opened 227 investigations, and 221 investigations have been closed. And up to this date, we have 28 pending investigation complaints still pending. And of course, that's just followed over from September. I thought it was important to note that from the beginning, from July 11, 2022 to September 23rd, till September, how many investigations have been closed in total. And so we've closed 308 investigations total. So getting into just the DIG investigations and case allegations. So from July, from the beginning, so just from year to date, ending in August 31st, there were a total of 826 allegations. And the allegations go from the fact that even though we have a complaint may have more than one allegation. So we've looked at a total of 826 allegations, and out of that, the board has reviewed 629 of those allegations. Cases that the allegations reviewed by the board, where the board disagreed or had an alternative recommendation, someone had asked for that information, has been a total of 6. Based on all of the allegations that the board has reviewed, there have been 6 that the board has recommended an additional allegation based on what the IG's office have. And from year to date, the cases that the chain of command has reviewed, so the chain of command has reviewed over 309 of the allegations that have been submitted through them. And out of that, we're looking at 43 of those allegations that the chain has reviewed was alternative findings to the DIG. And I wanted to kind of expound a little bit on that. I had a meeting today with the commanders. All of the investigations that are reviewed by the chain comes back, and we do review those investigations. So some of the alternative findings is not that they disagree with the investigation that was done. It has to do a little bit with the interpretation of my office when it comes to things such as exonerated versus the commands versus unfounded. So talking today was really great information. What we do is we look at the allegation as to make a determination as to whether what we're looking at, the officer comply with policy and procedure, whereas the command may focus a little bit more on the action. And to give you an example, is we had a case where we exonerated the officer for, the complaint was that the officer was rude. But when you look at the complainant is saying that the information that the officer was asking, they felt was rude. But what the officer was asking was information that was part of their investigation into why they stopped them for the traffic stop. So we exonerated the officer because the questions that the officer asked were not rude. They were part of their investigation, and it was in line with policy and procedure. So our finding for exonerated does state that if the alleged incident occurred, but it was within policy and procedure, we exonerate them. Whereas with the command, what they said, they were just looking at the action, and the action they said they found was unfounded, meaning that the officer in itself, he was not rude. So we are working with the command to make sure that we're kind of in sync with how we are doing our findings. And to give you another example, we looked at versus exonerated versus unfounded. And that tends to be just what we're looking at. There just may be something that we may have said was exonerated versus them saying it was unfounded. So those tend to be the different changes. It's not that they found that the investigation that we did, that we missed a step. The other thing I know the board mentioned, and we are looking at that, we don't have stats, but I will go back and we'll have to combine those stats. Another thing that the board asked was what type of corrective action is being taken. So some of the reports that we're getting back, we are finding, especially the ones that we've sustained, that the command has stated that they've taken corrective action. Some of their corrective action has been to talk to the officer, advise the officer regarding policy and procedure. So I'm hoping that by the next meeting, we'll kind of go back through all of those reports, especially the ones where we've sustained, and look at them to see exactly if there's some corrective action that's being taken, and then I'll be able to report that to the board so the board can kind of see the process.
Yes. Going back to what you were stating about the differences in terminology, are you saying now that you are working with command in order to kind of get our terminology to kind of be on the same page? Are we going to continue to have these differences where they say, well, no, they don't interpret that because of the way, the terminology that we use versus what the actions that they look at? Is that something that we're trying to do?
Well, what I want to do is find out exactly, so to your point, to answer your question, I want to understand why we're finding one way and they're finding another. And it tends to mostly be when we're exonerating something, they may turn around and say unfounded. So we know unfounded is we're saying that the allegation we're saying that the investigation did not find any evidence to substantiate the allegation. Exonerated, what we're saying is whatever actions the officer took was within policy and procedure. So we just want to make sure, again, that we're on the same page. So again, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I do want to be able to sit down with the command along with our general counsel, because we want to make sure that we're all staying within policy and procedure if we make any changes. But we do want to understand why, again, when we look at that, there's just their terminology of what they're stating versus what we're stating. But I think the great thing is that when they look at our investigation, they haven't came back to say that they found something in our investigation that was missing, that when we were saying what the policy is or procedure, that we didn't have enough information or we didn't have enough evidence to actually support what our finding is. But again, we just want to find out what we need to do to make sure that, we're both on the same page, whether that is command coming over and looking at what we say sustain is versus what they say unfounding is. I think it's going to take a little bit more of a conversation, and I think it's going to take our counsel to be present, because again, I don't know, based on the collective bargaining agreement or whether their policy or procedure, if that's something that the command can just change, because they're probably going based on what their policies are stating, their definition of exonerated versus unfounded is. Basically.
I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. If they have something in writing that states what unfounded means to them and what exonerated means to them, then there should be some kind of a way that we can be on the same page as to what those terms mean, so that when we do submit something to them, they won't be coming back and say, well, no, we see this as exonerated when you found it unfounded, or vice versa, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get to.
Absolutely, and that's what we want to make sure. We really want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Thank you.
And are there any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for this overview. Very helpful presentation. One of the questions that I wanted to put out there is just for either your office or the city to take a look at is kind of seeing how kind of what the average kind of timeline is in terms of kind of caseloads that have been reviewed by the Inspector General's office and then now have been reviewed by the police department, kind of what that timeline or what that potential backlog is. Because one of the things I'll say is that, you look at the allegations here of 826 plus allegations from July 11th, 2022 and August 31st, 2023. That's a lot. So one, just want to thank your office, but then two, just comparatively to how other jurisdictions do it, I think it would be helpful just to get a sense of that timing so that we all have a sense of realistically, of course you have the 90 days to complete the investigation, but realistically how these offices take, how long these cases take generally when it goes through the process. One, it would be helpful just to get kind of a timeline of you all review the cases, it goes to the review board, we then submit that to the CPD, and then their timeline of kind of closing that out. If we could get a sense of what that is, that average timeline is here, that would be helpful. And then if we could also maybe take a look at some other jurisdictions about what their timeline might look like. So for example, in Cincinnati, it's a different setup and a different process, but they've got their complaint authority, review authority, then they've got a timeline. Cleveland, similar as well. And I know this because we seem to be on a pretty good track, but I just also want to be mindful of how long we should expect these cases to finally resolve themselves.
Yes. And what I will say is we can actually provide that information. We may want to look more short-term, and the reason I say that is because we know the board is new, and we know in the beginning there's going to probably be that really long timeline with the board getting up and running and reviewing cases. So it might be nice now, since we know that the board is actively reviewing cases, that when we look at that timeline, we know that timeline is going to get shorter and shorter. And I can definitely provide that information because that might be something that maybe the board might want to know, hey, how long was it taking us in the beginning to right now, so that we know we can kind of expound them. But I didn't want to take too much of your time because I know you have a very busy agenda.
We appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inspector General. All right, moving to subcommittee review cases. Just to be clear, the cases listed below are the ones under number 3 are the ones we did not get to last month. Is that correct? All right, thank you. I know that no one from Subcommittee 1 is here. However, they have forwarded me their sheets. I have also read the cases that were assigned for this month. So I will read out their summaries and recommendations. I can tell you that they didn't have anything that was administratively closed. They also did not have cases that they disagreed with the outcome. So for purposes of the record, I'll read a quick summary, and then if anyone has questions, let me know, some of which I will not be able to answer because I was not in their meetings, but to the extent that I can, I will try my best. Starting first, case number 2022-03656. I may be out of order. I apologize. I'm also basing it on the order that I got them in my inbox. So this complainant alleged that he was stopped by officers and had his window shattered, that he was dragged out of his vehicle and pushed against the rear cruiser of his car during a traffic stop and was provided false information. Following the investigation of the IG, the investigation revealed that the driver's side window was broken to gain control of the complainant, who at the time was believed to be in control of what was a stolen vehicle. Those actions were within CPD policies and procedures. It's recommended that that allegation be closed with the finding of exonerated. And allegation number 2, review of body-worn camera footage showed the officers did not drag the complainant from his vehicle, nor was he pushed against the cruiser. Therefore, his actions were in accordance with CPD policies and procedure. It is recommended that that allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation 3, the report number initially given the complainant was actually the incident report for damage to his vehicles. That was later rectified. Therefore, those actions were in accordance with CPD policies and procedures. It is recommended that that allegation also be closed with a finding of unfounded. The subcommittee agreed with the recommendations of the IG. I would entertain a motion to then accept those findings as submitted.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second? Great. I'll move on to the next one. 2023, case number 2023-0332. This complaint came through the hotline alleging misconduct by a CPD officer. The complainant alleged that he was falsely pulled over and issued a traffic citation for making an illegal turn. Although he says the reason he was pulled over was because he was being racially profiled, it was not for an illegal turn. In addition, the complainant alleged that he went to the courthouse on the ticket and that the ticket had never been filed with Franklin County Municipal Court. Investigation from the IG's office, which included an interview with the complainant and the officer at issue, and also the ticket was reviewed in the clerk's office. The investigation found no evidence to support the complainant's allegation that he was falsely pulled over or that the reason he was pulled over was due to racial profiling. It's recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded because the officer had legal cause to initiate the traffic stop following the illegal movement. The DIG was unable to determine if the ticket not being on file was the fault of the officer or of the county clerk making a clerical error in processing. Therefore, that allegation is recommended to be unfounded as it relates to the second allegation that the officer engaged in malfeasance through that failure. The review committee did not disagree with these findings. Accordingly, I would entertain a motion on case number 2023-0332 to accept the findings as stated.
So moved.
Second.
Seconds, okay. Next is 2023-0329. The IG received a complaint from the hotline where a mother alleged excessive use of force was utilized during her son's arrest. The mother claimed that the officer stomped on her son's head and kicked him. The mother was not present when the incident occurred. The IG interviewed the complainant about the allegations, and the complainant also alleged that officers used profanity when her son was told to get on the ground and put his cigarette out. The investigation revealed that in regards to the allegations, the complainant was kicked and stomped on the head by officers. The investigation found no evidence, In regards to the allegation of being kicked and stomped in the head, the investigation found no evidence to support the complainant's allegation. It's recommended that that one be closed as unfounded. It did reveal the complainant was arrested and use of force was used by taking the complainant to the ground as the complainant was resisting arrest and then handcuffed. The officer's actions, however, were determined to be in accordance with CPD policies and procedures. In reference to the second allegation that profanity was used, the complainant was told to get on the ground and put his cigarette out, and the investigation found no evidence to support the complainant's allegation in that regard. It is then recommended that that allegation also be closed as unfounded. However, the IG observed profanity being directed towards the complainant when, at a later point in the exchange, when the complainant said, "You're going into an effing gurney if you don't quit," violating CPD policies and procedures. It's therefore recommended that the IG opened an additional allegation, and it's recommended that that one be sustained. I'll handle these as two separate motions. First, regarding the allegations 1 and 2 being closed as unfounded. In case number 2023-0329, the recommendation from the subcommittee was that those be accepted. I would entertain a motion to accept and refer those along as written by the IG.
Second.
Okay, and a second, all right. And then separately, an additional allegation also as a result of the investigation from 2023-0329, that the additional allegation of sustained for officers' use of profanity, I would entertain a motion or accept a motion on that count as well.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, I've got 2022-0192. Here, the Inspector General received a complaint. Oops. Apologies, strike that one. I think I copied that twice. Ms. Brock, can you make sure that 0329, what I just read off, matches the facts associated with that report? It does. Okay, it does, okay, awesome. All right, I'll come back to this one then, because I might be wrong about the next number. 2022-0135. Here was an allegation of possible misconduct. The complainant filed a complaint on behalf of her boyfriend, who alleged that he was injured by an officer during his arrest that occurred back in July of 2022. Specifically, the complainant claims that the officer hit her boyfriend's head with bars located in the rear of the police cruiser. However, the complainant was not sure which officer affecting the arrest was the officer who was alleged to have done this. So all officers who are listed were part of the investigation. The IG reviewed body-worn camera footage for the officers involved to determine what actually transpired during the arrest. They reviewed cruiser footage with the cruiser that transported the injured person to police headquarters. The IG also interviewed officers that interacted with him while he was on the scene. Based on that information, evidence, and officer statements, the investigation found the officer's actions and response during the arresting process was supported by CPD policy, with some exceptions. The investigation revealed that an officer used profanity during the injured person's arrest. Another officer's behavior was discourteous to a citizen during the incident, and an officer did not ensure his equipment was properly operational before service. So, as it relates to the injured party's allegation of the officer being the one who contributed to the injuries to his head, the IG found that one to be exonerated, the officers to be exonerated, and the subcommittee agreed with those recommendations. And give me just 1 second as I pull the additional ones. My apologies for the delay. Okay. The IG additionally found three other rule violations in addition to the allegation that was filed by the complainant, and recommended that the report be forwarded to the City of Columbus Director of Public Safety in accordance with disciplinary action of CPD policies and procedures in the collective bargaining agreement. And that is for specifically using profanity when instructing the arrestee to get on the ground, by being rude and discourteous and failing to be courteous as he spoke to the arrested person while making the arrest, and not ensuring that body microphone was synchronized prior to in-service. So those three will be in a separate motion. But initially, I'd like to first entertain a motion in light of the subcommittee's agreement that in 2022-0135, the original allegation being closed as exonerated. Would anyone like to make a motion? Thanks. May I have a second, please? Second. All right. And then concerning the three additional allegations that the IG found warranted discipline and sending over to Director of Public Safety and the Chief of Police, I'd entertain a motion as to those three allegations as well.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Perfect. All right, and then I've got case number 2022-0041. In this case, the complainant filed a complaint alleging excessive force and misconduct by officers. Specifically, the complainant alleged that an officer was aggressive with her when she was arrested and handcuffed, and she believes this was motivated by her race. In addition, the complainant alleges that one of the responding officers refused to provide his badge number as identifying information, and that another officer attempted to break her cell phone while stomping on it. This was alleged to have happened when the complainant was visiting her son, who was staying with her sister. An investigation followed. It included a review of CPD policies, body-worn cameras, cruiser videos, 911 audio, and the CAD report. Based on the evidence and information reviewed, it's recommended that one specific officer be exonerated, as the investigation found no evidence that the actions taken against the complainant were racially biased. It's also recommended that another officer be exonerated, as the investigation found no evidence that another officer refused to give his badge number, as the complainant initially alleged. Additionally, the investigation found no evidence that, and then it lists 4 officers, ever attempted to break her phone. So that allegation is recommended to be closed as unfounded. Furthermore, it found that all of the actions taken by officers during this engagement were within CPD policies and procedures. The subcommittee did not disagree after reviewing the full report with any of the recommendations that were listed in the report, so I would entertain a motion to accept 2022-0041 as written.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All right, 2022-0169. In this instance, a complainant alleged, it's another excessive force case where a complainant alleged that CPD officers tossed her out of her car and slammed her against her car after accusing her of throwing her elbow at an officer at a park. Then gives the location of the park. The IG reviewed the 911 emergency communications, CPD directives to determine what actions the officer should take when responding to an incident of this type. Body-worn camera footage was reviewed, and footage of the officers and business office footage of the incident were also reviewed to determine what actions were taken during the incident. All officers who were involved with this incident were also interviewed regarding it. The investigation revealed that the complainant was moved out of her car onto the floor, as alleged in her complaint. Therefore, it's recommended that this allegation against the officer is sustained. However, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate that she was slammed against the car. Therefore, that allegation is recommended to be closed as unfounded. In addition, the investigation revealed that two officers violated CPD policy and procedures by being rude and discourteous to the complainant during the incident. So again, 2 separate motions. The first is allegation being sustained in part for the excessive use of force, but unfounded as it relates to the second portion of that, which was being slammed up against a car. And then an additional separate motion for an IG finding that officers violated policies and procedures by being rude and discourteous. So on as to the first motion, the allegations originally filed by the complainant in case number 2022-0169, I would entertain a motion to accept those recommendations as written. Any seconds?
Second.
Okay. And then separately, a DIG started allegation or initiated allegation that officers violated policies by being rude and discourteous with a sustaining to that. I'd entertain a motion. Thank you. Second. Okay, so those are all the cases from September. Does anyone have, from August?
I have a question about that 092.
092. Oh, yes, thank you, 092. Let me go back and pull, because I think I actually grabbed the wrong content from that. Thank you for reminding me that that one still existed out there. Could you? That way it'll just pop to the top of my inbox. Thank you. Because I've got about, in one email, I have all the cases from sub-team 1. So it takes a little minute to find them. And now we're just dependent on the Wi-Fi in the building to get it. While I'm waiting to pull that up, does anyone have any discussion or questions regarding any of the motions we currently have on the floor for Team 1's August cases? Thank you. Okay. So case number 2022-0192, the complainant in this case filed an allegation of misconduct against an officer, stating that the officer did not appropriately investigate her calls for service, which were initiated through ADT Security Services. The complainant alleged that if the officer had been more thorough in his response to her calls, specifically by going to the rear of her residence, she would not have been stuck under a chair for over 5 hours. Based on the review of BWC footage, CPD policies and procedures, it's recommended that the allegation be closed as exonerated, as the officer's actions were appropriate, thorough, and supported by CPD policies, procedures, and/or law. The investigation shows that the officer can be seen knocking on front doors and windows of the residence, examining all windows, then walking back to the rear of the residence and trying the back door without being able to get into the home. The officer used his flashlight to see if he could see inside the residence. He made sure that the residence was secure and there were no signs of forced entry. And then after no response and no signs of imminent danger, the officer can be seen walking back out to his cruiser. When reviewing BWC footage, it's clear that no noises could be heard in the background that may have otherwise indicated to the officer that someone was stuck inside. After reviewing that report, the review subcommittee agreed with the recommendation that the case be closed with the finding of exonerated. Given that the recommendation has come from the subcommittee, I'd entertain a motion to accept that recommendation as written.
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about that case? All right, given the, I believe it was 7 cases read, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the 7 remaining cases from Team 1's August. All in favor, please raise your hands or say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries on all of those. And thank you, Ms. Roth. All right, moving on then to Team 2 for the remaining cases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cases that were not completed at the last meeting from August.
All right. Thanks so much. Going to provide a review. Thank you for those watching online and those joining us. So this is the review from last report's meeting of our August assigned cases. Just going to go a quick overview first in the order of the cases we accepted. The Department Inspector General recommendations. That was 346, 366, 378. It says 393 here, but I believe it's 339. At least that's what we have. And then 458. And then we disagree with case number 441, but we'll walk through that last. So for the first case up here is 346. This was a case where The complainant contacted the Department of Inspector General stating an individual was attempting to camp out on her property when she contacted CPD. They claimed the officer took a long time to arrive at her residence after she called 911 twice. Also, the complainant claims that the officers were dismissive and rude towards her as she discussed her concerns. The Department of Inspector General reviewed this case and the policies and procedures. They reviewed the body-worn camera footage. And they found no evidence to support the allegations made by the complainant here. And so our subcommittee agreed with and accepted the findings of the Department Inspector General. And so we would move to accept the recommendation of, and I would just run through the allegations specifically here, of basically, sorry, I want to pull that back up. Allegation 1 was that one of the officers took a long time to respond. Allegation 2 was that one of the officers was dismissive to the complainant while discussing the incident. And allegation 3 was that one of the officers rolled his eyes and made a dismissive comment about the incident. After reviewing the report and the body-worn camera footage, they determined that so I just want to follow up here. Just want to make sure this is correct. They determined that the statement that were made were actually made calmly and appeared to be more inquisitive to understand the complainant's situation. The actions did not violate CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it's recommended that the allegations be closed unfounded. So for each of the 3 allegations, 1, 2, and 3, the recommendation was unfounded, and our committee accepted that recommendation from the Department of Inspector General. So we would move to accept, we'd make a motion to accept the recommendation on case number 346.
It's been moved. Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you.
Next, we have a 366 case number. This is where a complainant and several other family members were submitted a department. Well, this is actually was an anonymous submission where the complainant alleges to be a witness, and his complaint stems from the arrest of the victim on Sunday, March 26, 2023. The complainant and several other family members were complying with police requests for information as it pertains to the victim, who was in a mental health crisis. The complainant alleged several officers informed them the victim would be medically and psychologically evaluated at the county jail. The complainant alleged that they were lied to because the victim was not evacuated, and the jail staff informed them that they did not do that for all the inmates who came in. After review of the body-worn camera footage and the computer-aided dispatch, unit history, and a statement from the complainant, the investigation revealed that at no time did the officer inform the complainant that the victim would be medically and psychologically evaluated at the county jail. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegations against the officer be closed as unfounded, as there's no evidence that the alleged actions occurred. And then we didn't have further questions from this regarding the case. The Department of Inspector General also looked into whether or not there was any issues around discourteous conduct, and they found that the officers did not appear to be rude, discourteous, or misleading in any manner. This was the call for service more broadly. Just background on this is that there was a call for service turned into a barricade situation lasting close to 9 hours. And one of the officers was accompanying the family member's presence on the scene, and the officer was observed providing accurate and consistent updates and remained with the family until SWAT officers cleared the residence. The body-worn camera footage also revealed that the officer informed the complainant and family members to contact the Franklin County Sheriff's Office to file for an active probate order for the victim, and there was no evidence that appeared to be rude, discourteous, or misleading. We would agree with the recommendation for complaint number 366 of unfounded for the allegation of the officer being misleading and stating that the victim would be medically and psychologically evaluated at the county jail when he was not. That's my motion, I guess.
All right. It's been moved. May I have a second, please? Second. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have 378. This is when the complainant alleged that a police officer violated her civil rights and pulled and yanked her around. The complainant's allegation about her civil rights being violated is a legal issue which does not fall under the Columbus Department Inspector General's authority to investigate. Therefore, this allegation by the complainant will not be investigated. However, after that particular allegation will not be investigated. However, after a review of the evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. Just a little bit more detail on this one in particular. So the investigator writes that, quote, the complainant's allegation about her civil rights being violated is a legal issue which does not fall under the Columbus Department Inspector General's authority to investigate, end quote. So our review committee would like further explanation of this comment, either now or later, and just wanted to check in on whether there were other entities that are following up regarding an allegation of a possible civil rights violation, or has this allegation already been referred to another agency? So that was the question that we had related to this particular case. So whether you need to answer that now or later, it's entirely up to you, but that was one of the initial questions that we had. Go for it.
Board Member Younger, and then we'll turn to the IG.
I have a suggestion. Maybe this could be done in advance before coming to the board meeting so that the IG may have an opportunity to get the question to you in advance, and then you could get that answered.
Appreciate that, Board Member Younger. So this was submitted ahead of this meeting. This was actually for our last meeting. So this was here in September.
All right, so you didn't have the opportunity maybe to get back to you? They didn't have the opportunity to get back to you? Is that maybe what happened?
I'll have to research. I don't remember getting any email on that, and I do believe that there was a prior case we have, and I'll let Tobias chime in on that. I believe there was a case once before very similar. Remember where there was an allegation of civil rights, and I think we recommended that we didn't look into that because that's more of a
Ohio Civil Rights Commission.
yeah. So that would be the reasons why we would not investigate that specific allegation.
And so just a kind of follow-up on that, I mean, has this case been referred to the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, or what's the process there?
So one of the process, and I'll go on and let Investigator Hurley, because he actually works more, and he'll be able to fill you in on that.
Yeah, so anytime these come up with all of our investigators, I've told everybody that, we need to know our resources and know the resources that are available to the city and the citizens in the state of Ohio. Something like this comes up, we tend to let them know that they should make that complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. They would then determine whether or not they would be opening a case on it. As far as this particular case, I don't have an answer as to whether or not that did happen. I can tell you that's what our general practice has been. And I can get an answer to the IG, and we can get that back to you guys probably by the next meeting as to whether or not that did occur with this case in particular.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean, so for that, and that's case number 378. And so instead of moving on that, I mean, more broadly, we accepted the recommendation in terms of one of the allegations, but more broadly, we wanted to follow up about this referral or not. And so before we move on that would be my recommendation for case number 378 to figure out whether or not that has been referred to the Ohio Civil Rights Commission and what that process might be. Yeah.
So we would not, that would not be something we would refer, because we would have to, it have to be referred by the individual, because we can't be the complainant. So that would have been information that we would have provided for them, and that would have been something that they would have had to seek on their own.
Okay. So I'll rephrase my statement. So just want to, before we move forward on this, would want to make sure that we've told the individual or inferred them of their potential rights here to file a complaint with the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, if that makes sense, just like
So
other
tab-
cases.
Table this vote until the next meeting.
I have a question
Yeah.
on this.
Yes, Reverend.
Is it not stated in the document, the investigation, that she was referred and told that that was something that she would have to take up, move forward with another organization on her own, whether it's Civil Rights Commission or whatever? I just want to know, was that in the investigation?
Let me,
We're going to have somebody make a phone call right now to determine if that was done, so that we, because it was from October of '22. So I want to make sure we get that for you guys right now.
is it October 20? I'm not seeing October 2022 here.
2022-0378, case date was October 10th, 2022.
No, I'm looking, it's 2023. That's not what I see. 2020.
23-378.
Yep.
But we will get you that answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Great. Yeah, just because one of the question I would have is then, because there was an allegation that you did review here in this particular case, which was that whether or not she was pulled or yanked around, and then there was a separate allegation as to whether their civil rights were violated, and I just wasn't sure if they were the same set of allegations or if those were separated out.
What I will tell you is, again, a lot of times when complainants call us and they make a complaint, they may not necessarily know the legal terminology. So that is one of the reasons we do ask for clarification. So in this case, they were saying that they felt that their civil rights were violated by this action that they described. So we were able to investigate the action, but we needed them to understand that that action is only investigated as to whether or not the officers' actions violated CPD policies or procedures. If they felt that the actions that they're saying, that they thought that was a civil rights, then they would have to they would have to contact that agency for further investigation. But we do usually, we always ask for clarification. So hopefully that answers your question as to what they alleged happened and the actions that we took based on what they were saying, but also advising them just because they make that allegation doesn't necessarily mean that the terminology they were using was correct.
Got it. That's helpful. And is there a situation in which you all, if you determine that an allegation may rise to the level of a civil rights violation, where you would either work with counsel or with the safety director to have other agencies review this process, or is it only on the complainant to then, and I don't know, maybe Mr. Baez, if you want to
It's
answer
not
that
a
too.
complainant to contact the agency directly and file a complaint. I only know that because I have recent experience with a complaint that I'm working on representing a client of mine.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to hold that for now. I think we're in the process of getting an answer. And then the next one we have is case number, it says 393 here. I have 339. Is it 339? Okay. Thank you. So this is a complaint alleged that an officer who responded to a custody exchange was rude and made threats to him for no reason. He alleged that the officer kept leaving and coming back inside the house and escalating the situation. After review of the relevant policies and a review of the body-worn camera footage, the investigation revealed that the officer was not rude, did not make any threats, and did not continue to go in and out of the complainant's home as alleged. Therefore, it's recommended that this case be closed with a finding of unfounded for both allegations. And the allegation was one, that the officer was beyond rude, and then two, that the allegation threatened to charge the complainant with interference of custody. After review of the body-worn camera footage, it was determined that this was unfounded, that the comments did not rise to a level of interference of custody according to the definitions within police policies. And our team, subcommittee two, agreed with the findings here and accepts the recommendation for case number 339 of unfounded for both allegations. We moved to accept.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Then we have case 458. I just want to pull that up just to make sure this is right. So case number 458, this is where a complaint alleged that on April 13, 2023, he was walking around on Stelzer Road between midnight and 1:30 a.m. with his AR-15 rifle when police stopped him. He stated, quote, he was told by officers that people were calling in complaining about him and that he matched the description of someone they were looking for. The complaint, end quote, the complainant stated he was put in handcuffs and made to sit on the bumper of a police unit. In addition, the complainant alleges an officer turned his phone off from recording, that he was asked for a supervisor and got no response from officers. Two officers would not provide their identification information. He feels he was racially profiled and the officers endangered his life. After a review of the footage, they revealed that the officer's use of force, or the investigation revealed that the officer's use of force was level 0 while detaining the complainant, which includes verbal commands, searching, handcuffing, and displaying a firearm. The body-worn camera footage from the responding officers showed all three responding officers verbally gave their name and badge numbers to the complainant before leaving the scene. In addition, the Department Inspector General found no evidence that substantiates the complainant's allegation that the phone was turned off from recording by an officer and that the complainant asked for a supervisor, that the complainant was racially profiled, or that his life was endangered by officers. No particular racial issues were discussed, referenced, or explained during the officer's interaction with the complainant. And after review of the footage and the reports, as well as CPD policy and procedure, it's recommended that all the reported allegations be closed with a finding of unfounded. Our subcommittee accepts the Department Inspector General's findings of unfounded for all three allegations in case number 458, and we would move to accept the recommendations.
Perfect. And that's, aside from 0041, those are all the ones you all agree with, and then
Yep.
minus 378? Okay,
Except for the one where we're waiting on the question to come back from,
okay.
the question to be answered.
So we've got open motions and seconds on case numbers 2022-0346, 2022-0366, 2023-0339, and 2023-0458. Any questions or discussion on any of those?
Madam Chair, I do want to, Kyle, you remember that 458 is kind of going to, if it's other case that we're going to do this 441, if I remember right, and I'm not going to say what it is till you read it, I think that it's kind of a contradiction there at the way that they treat this man with an AR-14 versus how they treat this woman. Okay, so I just want to make that note.
Okay, any other question or discussion on those cases? All right, all in favor of accepting as recommended, please raise your hands or say aye. All right, no abstentions, no objections, motions pass. Thank you.
All right. So this is where our subcommittee disagrees with the Department of Inspector General recommendation. This is case number 2022-441. So again, this is one of those October 2022 cases. On October 31st, 2022, the complainant walked into Columbus Department Inspector General office and filed a complaint alleging police misconduct. The complainant explained that she witnessed a burglary at the Dollar General. When an officer responded to the scene, he told her to, quote, come here, end quote, then physically grabbed her. The complainant informed the officer that she was not who he was looking for. However, she was handcuffed and placed in a cruiser. The complainant's 12-year-old son was also detained, handcuffed, and placed in a cruiser. The Columbus Department Inspector General's investigation revealed the following about the complainant's allegations. In regards to allegation 1, the allegations taken by the officer grabbing the complainant by the arm were supported by CPD policy and procedures, and the officers were not an excessive use of force. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 1 be closed exonerated. In regards to allegation 2, the officer has discretion when making decisions concerning investigatory manners, and the officer's actions are supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 be closed exonerated. And now, in regards to allegation 3, which is that the complainant alleged that her 12-year-old son was detained, handcuffed, and placed in a cruiser without cause. That was my own statement of what allegation 3 is. Back to reading the report now. The officer was ordered by a sergeant to apprehend the complainant's son because at that time, CPD believed the complainant's son was involved in the burglary. An exception to the treatment of juveniles at the lowest level of control is if the involved crime is a felony, such as a burglary. Also, there was no mention of the age of the, it says violator here. I would say alleged violator, but it says just of the violator. The actions by the officers were supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 3 of the complainant's 12-year-old son being detained, handcuffed, and placed in a cruiser without cause be closed unfounded. In regards to allegation 4, which is the complainant alleged that the officer's actions were discriminatory and involved racial profiling, the description aired by the dispatcher matched the physical description, direction of travel, and relative time frame of the burglary as it relates to the complainants when the officers responded to the scene. The actions by the officers were supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 4 against the officers be closed with unfounded. Just going to talk general notes from our subcommittee as well as our review committee, as well as go into a little bit more in terms of the facts and the findings from this case. So our subcommittee, review committee has concerns with this incident and disagrees with the Department Inspector General's recommendation. Specifically, the actions with respect to allegation 3 seem to have potentially risen to the level of a policy violation. This is where the complainant alleged that her 12-year-old son was detained, handcuffed, and placed in a cruiser without cause. The investigator also writes that the actions by officers, quote, were supported by CPD policies and procedures, end quote. So we just had a general question here. If these actions are determined to be within policy, this situation may warrant a discussion about policy change. And then we had a broader questions about whether there has been an after-action/incident report completed by CPD or any other agency regarding this specific incident. And again, this was a case from 2022, so I understand if this has been completed or there's been a process here, we wanted to follow up on that. But there was just a number of concerns here, and just, I read a summary, but this is basically at a high level here. One of the complainant stated that at approximately 7 a.m., she and her 2 children, a son that was 12 years old and a daughter that were 10 years old, were walking walking to an area before walking them to school, and they passed a Dollar General store and she and her son noticed a female inside the Dollar General stealing items. The female ran out of the store towards a Turkey Hill wearing shorts and a dark shirt. The manager came out of the store with a phone in his hand asking where she went. The complainant pointed and stated that she ran toward the Turkey Hill, and the family continued to walk towards the Turkey Hill store. The complainant said that within a minute, a cruiser pulled up next to her, the door opened, and the officer stated, quote, "Come here," then grabbed her left arm. The complainant stated, "Let me go, I am not who you are looking for." And then the complainant stated that the officer said, "I am not letting go." The complainant then told her children to go get the manager from the dollar store and to get their dad. She was then handcuffed, the complainant, and seated in the cruiser. The officer told the complainant that the female they were looking for wore a maroon jacket. The complainant asked the race of the female, and the officer said black, and the complainant felt she was profiled at this point. The complainant admitted she was wearing a maroon jacket at the time, but she had long gray sweats, and the complainant shared with the officer what she observed outside the Dollar General. The officer released the complainant after a very short time, and she collected her items from the cruiser hood and walked to the Dollar General where her children were located. As she approached the store, she noticed that her son's book bag and coat were on the hood of a cruiser, and her son was in the back seat of the cruiser. And And so when she arrived, an officer opened the cruiser door and removed the handcuffs from her son. The complainant asked why her son was cuffed in a cruiser, and she claimed she never received a straight answer. And one of the officers stated that he could not tell if the son was an adult or juvenile. At this point, the officers were saying the detention was a mistake, and the store manager did not give them a good description. She said she was flabbergasted. The officers asked if she needed a ride. She declined. And it kind of goes into the situation. The dad eventually arrived. He was upset, and then it goes into more descriptions here. So I don't know if more for us to offer here. I mean, because it goes through a process of the incident, but we were concerned by the level of use of force used here, as well as how this situation was handled. And so that is where we disagreed with the allegation of unfounded for case number 441.
I would like to say,
Yes.
if I may, this was somewhat discouraging to me because going back to that one case, 058, when this man was walking down the street with an AR-14 in his hand, and the police stopped him. Yes, they handcuffed him, but they just leaned him up against the car. Now, with this particular woman, who, if I remember right, she was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
She was pregnant, if I remember right.
Yes.
And they not only handcuffed her, but they stuffed her in the car. You know, and I just thought it was something wrong with that, you know, as far as the race goes, because I think the gentleman that was marching down the street, I think he may have been Caucasian. I don't know for sure. If I'm wrong. But I just thought that there was a lot of differences in the way CPD handles its policy, you know, and so I had an issue with that. And that's one reason why I think there's nothing else. We need to really look at policy. They need to look at policy at how they handle one situation as to another, you know. And that's one of the reasons why I had some issues with this case.
Yeah, then I think just more broadly, this is a case from October 2022, right? So I don't know whether there have been. That's kind of why we asked a broader question about whether there's been an after action or an incident report or something that has gone, or if folks have been in contact with the complainant since this incident. But that was one of the concerns that we had related to this particular case.
What's the subcommittee's recommendation in opposition? So are you recommending either training, discipline, or could you form the recommendation from the subcommittee into an actionable motion that we can move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do think generally be helpful to know whether there has been an after action report on this or anything done regarding this particular situation, because there were incidents here where, you know, for example, it indicates that on allegation 3, it indicates that because there was a belief that they were involved, there was a burglary situation, and the actions of handcuffing the son was within CPD policy and procedures when confronting a suspected felon. And they indicated that there was no indication of the age of the burglar when the run was dispatched. So just wanted.
The alleged burglar was a woman, right?
No,
So
no,
not
yeah, exactly.
So not
exactly.
a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah, exactly. So there's two instances. One is the handling, use of force with the pregnant woman, and then 2, the use of force and handling with the 12-year-old son in this instance here.
You know, and to me, if I was going to make a motion, it would be to review policies when it comes to use of force, to make sure that they are being utilized the same across the board. You know, because it seems to me that there is a difference in how they deal with use of force versus one situation versus another. You know, and I just have issue with that. I really do. because I just think if this woman would have lost her child.
Yeah, so I don't know if in terms of how your office maybe made the determination here, but that's, I mean, it's a little concerning, and so I just wanted to get a sense. I don't know in terms of obviously there are these cases that it's difficult, obviously on a case by case situation, but the findings here don't seem to be. Or the incidents seem to rise to the level of policy violation, but your office made the determination it does not. And so wanted to check in to see either what CPD has done regarding this specific situation, because it happened in October of 2022. So I'm wondering if we can get that information. And then to Board Member Tatum's point around a review of policy, certainly regarding how to handle these situations.
If I could maybe bring some specificity to the request about looking at policy. It feels like they fit in three ranges. One, disparate application of a use of force policy across the board, which seems to fall into whether it's bias, cultural competence, things of that nature. Two, I think use of force policy with pregnant women. I know that I've had to take trainings before on like managing youth resistance that involve like knowing if you can utilize handcuffs with pregnant folks. And I know that you can't put them behind their back. So things of that nature, if we can check on that. And then also, and this is the one I at least have seen before, is I don't believe, or at least a few years ago, there did not exist a difference in use of force that was youth-specific, even though that was one of the recommendations from the Safety Commission, that there be a separate kind of youth engagement with police. Is it possible to get kind of a review or a report back as to whether any of those three things have been addressed since last year?
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking. So you're asking me to see if there is a use of force policy out there specifically that talks about how officers should handle women that may be pregnant. And you're asking if there's a use of force policy specifically out there for how they handle use. And we do know for use that they do, but we also know in this case that what we don't know is whether the officer knew whether or not the person was pregnant. We also have, based on the officer's statement, that they were not able to make a determination as to whether the youth was there, if they was a youth. I think they. If he was an adult. Right, if he was an adult or not. And that's part of what the officer's statement is. But
I do think that, and we've talked about this before, right? Like, we know that black and brown children are perceived as being anywhere from 4 to 6 years older than what they actually are. And so that's part of some of the recommendations that have at least come from the Safety Commission and even our board at times, is there needs to be a better education around, if you think somebody's 18, know that your bias, if you remember, we all took an implicit bias assessment, that your bias could very well be inflating the age that you think that person is. And then third, do we know any data? I know that we've seen, it's been a while since Matrix Consulting released its report that showed the kind of statistics on, use of force uses, arrest, how it differentiates among race, among zip code, things of that. Is it possible to see if that's been updated? And then maybe if we get a report back on those, would that help inform what motion to make out of this case?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So you want me to see if CPD if they have a report or if anything is out there regarding, so I just want to make sure when I report back. So we're looking to see if there's a use of force policy that specifically talks about the handling of pregnant women and juveniles specifically. And I think you're asking does CPD offer any type of education or training to be able to make that determination of when they're dealing with use from different backgrounds, if they offer any specific training on that. And then it sounds like the third thing you're asking is if CPD has any type of report out there that talks about how use of force is used across the different communities.
Yeah,
Well,
or an
yeah,
update,
specific-
because the
yeah.
report was done back in maybe 2019, 2018. And then CPD created a dashboard in which folks could see updated information on recommendations that came from that Matrix Consulting report. I do not know if the data specific to use of force incidents has been updated. If it has, that would be great for us to know as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, and I think specifically to this case as well, because, I mean, one, the allegation was that there was a female alleged burglar, and then, so when you have a 12-year-old boy running to the store, and that, the notion, I mean, the factor to consider as to why, for allegation 3 allowed that the sworn personnel could take the lowest level of appropriate enforcement action available, one of the factors was included here was that the officer believed that the person was involved in a burglary. I'm not sure why the son was handcuffed in this particular situation. So to us, not sure in terms of the exact allegations we can have for 1, 2, and 4 in terms of moving forward, but specifically to allegation 3, we disagreed with that finding. And so, but again, I don't know the specifics in terms of what the policy or the practice is in this situation. Reverend Tatum?
But I personally want to make it known that I am not saying that the DIG's office did anything wrong. I am saying that the only thing you guys can base your findings on is what the current policy states. But I do think that there comes a time when we have to question certain policies that are still in force, because everything changes. I don't care, what it is. There's some type of change that takes place, and I think that it's one of our responsibilities, at least me being on this board, is to make sure that everybody's being treated fairly across the board. And so therefore, that's what I have to say about that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think where, especially me struggling is, I'm the person that called in and made the complaint, and I'm the one that ends up in handcuffs. Not only do I end up in handcuffs, my son ends up in handcuffs.
Yes.
We all struggle with that. So, if that's what the policy is to detain everybody in the vicinity, the policy is flawed.
Yeah, and that was a detail I remembered from that case as well, that she was the one that called.
Yes.
And she's the one who ends up.
Yes.
She and her son end up arrested. So I feel like until we get that information, we aren't going to make a motion on it, which is fine. But if we could have that information, or at least an update, I think that'll help better inform what the recommendation from the board will be. So that what we're recommending is based on whatever currently exists and what we think would actually be a better policy.
Perfect.
Okay, so we'll table 2022-0041, and for the time being, 2023-0378. All right. Team 3, your August cases, and then after that, we'll take a recess.
Case number 2022-0301. On September 12th, 2022, the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received an allegation of misconduct involving CPD officers. The complainant alleged that CPD officers asked her boyfriend to step out of the vehicle, which he started to do, but then they allegedly grabbed him forcefully and placed him in handcuffs. The complainant was told to get out of the vehicle, and while trying to put on her shoes, they grabbed her forcefully as well and placed her in handcuffs, stating she was under arrest for an outstanding warrant. The complainant claims she tried to tell the officers repeatedly that the warrant had been resolved. However, she was taken to jail, and she claims her car was damaged when impounded. The complainant stated she filed the complaint because of how the entire incident was handled. Also, she claims she received bruises on her wrists from the handcuffs. Based on the information and evidence obtained and reviewed regarding this incident, the Columbus DIG recommends a finding of unfounded for allegations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Allegation 1 was CPD officers aggressively arrested her boyfriend when they took him out of the vehicle. Allegation number 2, police officers aggressively arrested her by grabbing her forcibly as she was getting out of the vehicle. Allegation number 3, CPD officers arrested her for a menacing charge illegally since she did not have a warrant for her arrest. Allegation number 4, CPD officers impounded her car illegally and damaged her vehicle. And then allegation number 5, CPD officers caused bruises from being handcuffed, and she received bruises, cuts, and swollen arms from being arrested. So let's tackle allegation number 1. The Columbus DIG's review of the officer's BWC footages did not observe the complainant's boyfriend being aggressively taken from the car, as the complainant alleged. The BWC showed that officers de-escalated the incident by explaining their actions to her boyfriend, and he exited the car. Also, the boyfriend was observed apologizing to the officers for his actions. No complaints were observed by her boyfriend from the BWC footage. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends that allegation 1 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 2, the DIG's review of the officer's BWC footage did not observe the complainant being aggressively or forcefully taken from the car as alleged. The BWC showed that the officer advised the complainant that she had a menacing warrant for her arrest and to step out of the car. The complainant was handcuffed and escorted to the cruiser by that officer. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends allegation 2 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 3, the investigation revealed that the warrant for the complainant was reported as a good order in by the clerk of courts. As a result, the complainant was arrested to CPD Directive 3.01 D1. Court order ends are excluded from the summons process. Once the warrant was verified as a good order in through the Franklin County Clerk's Office, the warrant is considered enforceable. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends that allegation 3 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 4, the investigation found that officers were within CPD policy and procedures to impound the complainant's vehicle per Columbus City Code Section 2107.01C. Reasons for impounding, it states, any vehicle from which the driver has been arrested or any vehicle operated by a person who refused to obey the instructions of any police officer after such person has been placed under arrest. Also, the removal by a police officer of a vehicle for any of the reasons mentioned in 2107.01 shall be at the risk of the owner or person in charge thereof, and there should be no liability on the part of the city for any damage caused by such removal. The storage of any vehicle impounded by the city shall be at the risk of the chauffeur, the driver, or owner thereof, and the city shall not be liable for damage of any nature or the theft or destruction by fire of any vehicle so impounded. The city of Columbus is exempt of damages. Therefore, the DIG recommends that allegation 4 be closed with a finding of unfounded. And finally, allegation number 5, the Columbus DIG investigated the complaint's allegation that she received injuries due to being handcuffed, and that her complaints of the handcuffs being too tight were ignored. The Columbus DIG made several requests to the complainant to provide documentation about her injuries. However, no documentation was ever submitted. The review of the officer's BWC footage shows that on several occasions, the complainant maneuvered her body to move the handcuffs from the back to the front of her body. Also, while handcuffed, the complainant used the handcuffs as a tool in an attempt to damage the prisoner transport vehicle during her transportation to jail. Based on this information, it is reasonable to conclude that if the complainant received injuries from being handcuffed, as she alleged, it is most likely the result of her own actions and not any actions from a CPD officer. Therefore, the DIG recommends that allegation 5 be closed with a finding of unfounded. So our group motions and agreed with the findings of the DIG for unfounded for allegations 1 through 5. Case number 22-0301.
So moved.
May I have a second, please? Thank you.
All right. Case number 22-0318. On September 16, 2022, the complainant contacted Columbus Department of the Inspector General, alleging that CPD officers searched his home without a warrant, went through his closets, throwing clothes out, and went through other rooms, tearing things apart. The complainant feels the Columbus Division of Police is liable for his wife's overdose and alleges the way things were handled were excessive for a bench warrant. Based on the information and statements received and the BWC footage and documents reviewed, the investigation revealed that CPD officers were invited by the complainant to search the house for his wife. Also, CPD officers had a bench warrant for his wife's arrest. The BWC showed that CPD officers searching for his wife, but no destructive actions were observed by any CPD officer. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends that allegation 1 be closed with a finding of unfounded. In addition, a review of the BWC footage indicated that CPD officers followed all procedures regarding the treatment of his wife. Therefore, Columbus DIG recommends that allegation 2 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Again, allegation 1 was that CPD officers searched his home without a warrant, went through his closets, throwing clothes out, and went through other rooms, tearing things apart. Allegation number 2, CPD officers were liable for the overdose, his wife's overdose, and the way things were handled were excessive for a bench warrant. Allegation number 1, CPD officers were invited to search the house by an older male believed to be the complainant. Complainant told officers he was trying to get his wife to come outside the house. Also, the officers were informed by another person that his wife was inside the residence. In addition, the officers had a bench warrant for his wife's arrest. The officers could legally enter the address and search for the wife at that point per section 2935.12 of the ORC. A, in part, when making an arrest or executing an arrest warrant or summons in lieu of an arrest warrant, or when executing a search warrant, the peace officer, law enforcement officer, or other authorized individual making the arrest or executing the warrant or summons may break down the outer or inner door or window of a dwelling, house, or other building. The officers were observed searching through cluttered conditions, and their actions were not excessive or in a destructive manner. The officers' actions and response were supported by CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends that allegation 1 be closed with the finding of unfounded. Allegation number 2, a review of the officer's BWC footage indicated that the officers followed all procedures regarding the treatment of his wife. When she notified CPD officers that she was feeling sick, CPD officers requested a Columbus fire medic to respond to a meeting location away from the residence. There, she was treated and transported to the hospital. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that CPD's actions caused the wife to become sick. Therefore, Columbus DIG recommends the allegation be closed with the finding of unfounded. And our group, again, agrees with the IG's finding, and we motion that the findings of allegations 1 and 2 be unfounded in complaint number 22-0318.
Okay, second, thank you.
Next case is case number 2023-0359. March 28th, 2023, the Columbus DIG received a complaint via email. The complainant alleged the Columbus Division of Police refused to wear protective masks while on guard duty in the hospital, and their behavior was unprofessional. The DIG reviewed the CPD documents and policies and statements regarding this incident. The investigation revealed the following. The pandemic policy orders are the COVID policy for wearing masks at health facilities asks that personnel follow the face covering and PPE requirements of the appointing authority. An update was relayed via division-wide email with an effective date of May 1, 2022, stating divisional personnel shall continue to follow the City of Columbus COVID-19 safe work practice guidance. In allegation number 1, officers' noncompliance to wear a protective mask while on guard duty in the hospital violated CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number 1 be closed with a finding of sustained. In allegation number 2, the complainant alleged Columbus police officers were unprofessional while on guard duty using inappropriate language while talking among themselves. The investigation revealed no evidence to support this second allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation, number 2, be closed with a finding of unfounded. One second. The conclusion, allegation number 1, Officers W and Officer L. The complainant alleged Columbus police officers to refuse to wear a protective mask while conducting guard duty at the hospital. The DIG reviewed the CBD policy and procedures regarding COVID policy for wearing masks at health facilities. The pandemic policy orders, COVID policy for wearing masks at health facilities, ask that personnel follow this PPE requirements of the appointing authority. An update was relayed May 1, 2022. During Officer W's interview, he admitted that he took a mask, but he did not recall wearing a mask because he was drinking coffee. Officer L states that he does not remember wearing a mask. The DIG concludes that the officers were given a protective mask at the hospital while on guard duty, and per their interviews, did not wear that mask. The officers' actions violated CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number 1 be sustained. Allegation number 2, Officers W and L. The complainant alleged that they were unprofessional during guard duty, using F-bombs and other colorful language while talking among themselves. The officers denied using any F-bombs or rudeness on their part while on guard duty at the hospital. The DIG reviewed the Exxon BWC system to independently determine if these allegations could be proven or disproven, but no BWC was available for this incident. They were at the hospital guard duty. The Columbus DIG investigation found no evidence to support. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Our committee reviewed this and concurs with the IG. So at this point, we move to accept the finding of the DIG. Or do you want me to wait? Or,
still move. Yep,
Oh,
yep,
okay.
go ahead.
We move to accept the finding of the DIG as to case number 2023-0359.
Awesome. First and second, thank you.
And then the second case, this is case number 2023-0473. On April 19th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the DIG alleging excessive use of force by the police officer with CPD. The complainant alleged that on April 13th, 2023, officers pulled over a female driver. and told her she wasn't looking enough when she made her turn. Additionally, the complainant alleged one officer was rude by mocking and rolling his eyes at the suspect when she mentioned she was being stopped because of her skin color. One officer said that and did nothing, while the other officer reached into the suspect's car, grabbed her left wrist, and twisted it while he restrained it above her head, while the suspect cried, and this occurred over 20 seconds. The investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera, computer-aided dispatch, and CPD policy and procedures. A review of the BWC showed the officer asked the suspect for her driver's license a few times, but the suspect did not comply. The suspect mentioned to the officer she believed she was being stopped because she was black. The officer attempted to grab the suspect by her left wrist and advised her that he was not going to play games with her. Then the suspect gave the officer her license. The officer advised the suspect regarding her actions and released her. The suspect was not issued a citation. Also, the review of the BWC footage found no evidence the responding officers were rude or that they mocked the suspect as alleged by the complainant. Additionally, the review of the BWC found no evidence to support the complainant's allegation that the officer grabbed her wrist and twisted it above her head and that she cried. Therefore, it is recommended that both allegations be closed as unfounded. While driving his unit, Officer B was patrolling North High when he saw the unknown suspect driving her vehicle, pulling away from the parking spot and traveling halfway into the lane of oncoming traffic. Both vehicles came to a stop on North High Street, and the suspect opened the door and stated something to the driver of the oncoming vehicle, while still being positioned in the path of that vehicle. Next, the suspect drove about 1.5 blocks before Officer B initiated the traffic stop. The DIG attempted to reach her, but no response. The DIG found no evidence to substantiate any of her allegations, no wrist twisting or anything, so they recommended the unfounded. Our committee concurs. We accept the findings of the IG as to, we move to accept the findings of the IG as to case number 2023-0473.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
You're next.
Case number 2023-0485. On April 21st, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of the Inspector General alleging misconduct by a Columbus police officer. The complainant alleged on April 20th, 2023, he was at Walmart about 10:45 p.m. when a special duty officer made a slashing motion with his hand across his throat, indicating the store was closed as he approached the front door. He asked the officer why the store was closing early, and the officer responded, "Because I'm a cop and I don't give an F. I'm retiring." The complainant asked the officer to identify himself, and the officer replied, "He didn't effing have to. It's right here. You can effing come read it." The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of video footage from Walmart and a computer-aided dispatch CAD report. The Walmart video shows the officer was stationed inside the front doors of Walmart, having a verbal interaction with customers who were leaving and trying to enter the store. The video shows the officer motioning with his hand across his throat as indicated by the complainant, but the video has no audio. The complainant told the Columbus DIG that he had taken video footage of his interaction with the officer and would forward a copy of the video footage to the Columbus DIG for further review. However, no video footage was ever received from the complainant to corroborate his allegations. Therefore, it is recommended the allegations be closed unfounded, as there is no evidence to support the complainant's allegation. Allegation 1, the complainant alleged he had asked the officer why the store was closing early, and the officer responded, "Because I'm a cop, I don't give a F, I'm retiring." Allegation 2, the complainant alleged he asked the officer to identify himself, and the officer stated he didn't effing have to, pointed to his badge saying, "It's right here, you can effing come read it." As to allegation 1, the complainant alleged he asked the officer why the store was closing early. The officer responded, "Because I'm a cop and I don't give a F, I'm retiring." The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that the complainant be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation 2, the complainant alleged he asked the officer to identify himself. The officer stated he didn't effing have to, pointed to his badge saying, "It's right here, you can effing come read it." The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended the complaint be closed with a finding of unfounded. Our committee concurs with the Inspector General's investigation, and therefore I motion we concur with the report.
So moved. Any second?
Second.
Okay.
Now, hold on just a second, Kyle. What everybody should know is that there may be way more to this story than that, because we're never going to know because there's no audio. There's no audio on store footage cameras, which is kind of sad because we may have a different story here had there been. But as far as the investigation, as you know, there is no way to corroborate whether or not the language was used.
And as a kind of follow-up to that, I think that one of there's a couple questions I had. One is kind of what were the efforts to retrieve the alleged recording that the complainant alleged to have, right? Because he may or may not have that actual recording. And so I wanted to get a sense of what the follow-up was and if there was an explanation as to why that was never submitted. So that's the first question I had for the Department Inspector General's office.
The investigator made several attempts and even spoke with the complainant on several occasions, and he had said, "I will send you this stuff." We provided him the email address. We provided him several different email addresses in the event that, you know, he was maybe misinterpreting the original email address. We could only make so many phone calls to him and ask him to return that stuff to us before we have to surmise that we're not going to get it.
Excellent. So, and then just as a follow-up to that, I think just from a procedure standpoint, I think this is a perfect example as to why I don't know whether or not the complainant knows that their case would be heard in front of the Civilian Review Board and at what time it was going to be heard at the Civilian Review Board. But I do think this is an example of an opportunity for providing space for when somebody files a complaint, when the investigation is completed, and then letting them know that their complaint will be heard at X Civilian Police Review Board review committee meeting or subcommittee meeting or the full body meeting. This is an example because, you know, we don't want to be in a situation in which we make a decision to move forward on this and then somebody says, well, actually, here's the footage that I would have provided. I also understand that when you are given a certain time period of a process to provide evidence, and if you don't provide evidence within that time period, then that ultimately is on you. But I do think this underscores the importance of providing all available opportunities for there to be a hearing, both not just for the complainant, but also for officers involved in a particular instance as well.
Board Member Younger.
Our subcommittee did discuss all of this, and we were concerned about two things. We were concerned about the fact that the video did show the officer going like this, and so we thought, darn, why couldn't they get the audio? Well, I'm sure you didn't have an opportunity to read the case, but the case indicated that they made several attempts, and I mean, you can only do so much, and so, you know, they were unable to get the audio. And then we looked at the officer had, 25 years, I think, on, we checked, and he was close to retirement. So this was a case that kind of, you know, the three of us were thinking, you know, but they did, I mean, we couldn't just make stuff up. The evidence was the evidence, and they followed procedure, and that's what we had to do.
I have a question. I want to add a third one to that. the fact that we have been talking about every month, we at least have one case where there's an off-duty police officer that is normally a detective. I think this was a detective. Am I correct? Was this a detective?
I
or was
don't
it just?
think it says whether it's
Special duty.
it's just special duty.
You know, well, BWC, if it was in play, then we wouldn't even be talking about this.
I don't disagree with that, but I believe in our past cases that in special duty, that's not required.
That's what I'm talking about. We had talked in the past about talking with the chief to see why it could not be required. Because we know detectives are not required to wear BWC regardless of whether they're on special duty or not. They're not required to wear BWC. But it's getting so now that it's becoming more and more prevalent, especially when we're dealing with these cases, that there should be some kind of corrective procedure in place so that we can make sure we get all the evidence.
And just to remind everyone, so for this subcommittee, if this is something you want to do, as a board, we still have the option of having an actual hearing on any of our cases. And so I don't know, and I don't want to guess as to why the complainant didn't provide the video footage that he said he had. But if the subcommittee wants to hold a hearing, which would, require us to give notice to the people and everyone involved, if the subcommittee wants to give that opportunity to the complainant in this case, then it has to just be approved by a majority of the board. So it would follow a similar motion pattern for any of our other recommendations, but it would specifically be to host a hearing at one of our regularly scheduled board meetings. It is in the policies or the rules and regulations of our board.
So my thought here would be, just by general process, when somebody files a complaint, they go through the investigation process, they are then notified of the draft investigation or the investigation memo and the investigation findings. And then in that memo is basically your case will be heard at, and we are specific, and because right now I think it's probably a general language about this will be discussed at a future civilian review board meeting. But we haven't obviously set up your office to be in cadence with us to be able to know, because some cases don't get to us and all those types of details. But if we can get to the point where we know the date or the timing of when somebody's cases will be heard, we can then notify not just the complainant, but also CPD that this case will be heard at this upcoming meeting. And then that time at all of our regular meetings, if we carve out a particular time frame, I'm not saying it has to be a specific hearing, but there can be time for public comments, that we provide the space for that if somebody chooses to add that in. That to me is, I think, a standard by which every case could be, rather than, especially for just this case in particular, saying, let's do a separate hearing. I mean, if somebody doesn't provide the evidence they allege to have, then they didn't provide it. But I do think making sure that people know that CPD and complainants know that their cases will be heard at X meeting, and providing them the opportunity.
If I'm not mistaken, Board Member Strickland, I do believe that our committee meetings have the cases listed in advance. So someone knows, like when we had this case, that we were reviewing it. And if I'm also correct, it's posted what cases that we're going to be reviewing today. So they have the opportunity to, show up to the review and give testimony, evidence, whatever the case may be, as well as be here today. That does happen.
Yeah, but I think the evidence suggests that most people, and even including the beginning of our review board process, most people actually don't know when their case is being heard or being discussed. And so I think one of the ways that we can provide not just the complainant but CPD the space is by including specifically as part of the regular process that they're notified of the investigative findings, and then the date and time for when their report is going to be discussed. That's something that I know they do in Cincinnati. I know they do in other review board type of situations. I don't see why we couldn't do that here for Columbus. I don't know if Mr. Tobias or others have other pieces to add, but that seems to be part of a process that we could probably do.
Well, those are all things for you guys to decide how you want to run your meetings and how you want to direct the DIG. If folks do show up, you obviously could bring those matters to the top of the agenda to make sure that they're being discussed when they're here. I mean, that's something I would suggest.
And I will note, we have done that before, when we know that a citizen has shown up whose report is on for the agenda. I will say that it's only been recently, probably in the last several months, that we have been posting the cases that are being reviewed, but that now is happening, whereas in the beginning it wasn't. Does Subcommittee 3 want to make any changes to its motion that's already on the floor and seconded?
We do not.
No.
Okay.
Other thing I would say, a word of caution about folks showing up and then you deciding to, you use the phrase public comment. There's a very big distinction between someone showing up and making public comment versus putting them under oath and taking testimony. So I just want to make sure the board doesn't think that if folks show up, you can then just kind of move into a hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all, as
Yeah.
Chair Burns was saying, there's proper notice requirements and procedures that need to be followed. And if the board anticipates that it wants to have a hearing on any particular case, I would say it would be prudent for me to take a look at those rules and regs and provide some general guidance to the board in advance of that hearing.
That's super helpful. Yeah, I think maybe if, and I don't know about the hearing specifics, but, providing the public comment portion for these meetings, and then maybe thinking about what a process might look like if we wanted to do hearings separately.
Well, they already exist in our rules and regs. So our Rules and Regs Committee came up with and included public comment as a part of our regular meetings. They exist the same way that it would in City Council with a 3-minute time limit, like the pre-filled slips. We just haven't had anyone that's requested to do so. And the hearings themselves have also already been established in our rules and regulations as well.
But we aren't providing that in the communication with, my understanding, we aren't providing that in the communication with the complainant when, after they receive the findings from the Department of Inspector General. I think there's a general statement about that the review board will, vote on it, but I don't think there's anything specific about when it's going to happen. And so I think there's a way we can include that in our correspondence.
I'm not disagreeing,
Yeah.
but I also think that we can also just ask that given the time, and I will say this, because we don't always get through these, I don't know that it's possible to give someone a specific date because we don't make it through all the cases each meeting. So I think at most, we might say this quarter.
I think we can give some date.
But they also can look at the website before each meeting and each subcommittee meeting, and the case numbers are listed. So if they know what their case number is, once they're told it'll be heard in X quarter, members of the public can access the website and actually see with the public notice if their case is included on the list for this month, which still doesn't give a guarantee. For example, somebody with case number 0649 may not get heard today, even though it's on our agenda for today, but that information does exist. So if we could move, yes.
Just a quick question, point of clarification. They mentioned that it is posted, and I was curious, is there specific communication to a complainant that if you go to this link, watch for it the next month or two? Because I think that suffices, because I do agree with Board Member Strickland that I'm worried there's not communication. I mean, just that it'll be heard by the CRB, but when, but as long as there's communication that points to a link or,
Is the link included on the letter?
yeah, I'm curious what the
And
language
if
is.
not, could we just include
Yes,
the link on the letter?
that would not be a problem. We can definitely update our letter to include the DIG, the Civilian Review Board's link, so they'll be able to go to the site and pull that information.
Perfect.
Thank
Thank
That's
you.
appreciated. And if I could add too, and maybe there's language around, to check there regularly, cases aren't always heard, they're delayed or some type of language, simply because, we've got to look at this from the complainant standpoint, the average citizen. They may check it once, they didn't see it on there, but I think that would be really helpful.
Definitely. We can update our letter to provide the site and tell them to, look, and so that they'll be able to see exactly when their case would be heard.
It's great.
Yeah.
The other piece of information would be if you decide to have a hearing, you may want to consider setting a special meeting for that hearing, especially for the first one. It could take 3 hours.
Yeah.
As you're making your way through it and figuring out process and how it's going to flow.
And that's also included in our rules and regs, the consideration that the hearing may happen at a regular board meeting, or it may actually happen at a specially called board meeting. Reminder to everyone, please review your rules and regs so that you know what things we have at our disposal.
Well, we're reviewing them. We haven't really utilized them. So I think this is the time to utilize
Right,
them.
but Board Member Strickland, if we could, normally we reserve discussion till after all the cases have been moved and seconded. We did not do that. So I think I've given a lot of time to discuss these intricacies. If we could let Board Member Fluharty finish with the last case that his subcommittee has.
Okay, case number 2023-0540. On May 1st, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging misconduct by Columbus police officers. The complainant alleged the officers did not do their job in helping her get her things out of an apartment she was residing in. The investigation, which consisted of a review of the computer-aided dispatch, body-worn camera, and the Columbus Division of Police policies and procedures, found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. The actions taken by the officers were in accordance with CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officers be closed as unfounded. The complainant alleged officers did not do their jobs in helping get her things out of the apartment that she was residing in. The complainant alleged officers failed to do their job in helping her get her things out of the apartment she was residing in based on the information and evidence obtained. The Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against the officers be closed with a finding of unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Also, actions taken by the officers were in accordance with CPD policy and procedures. I move to concur with the Inspector General's findings.
Second.
All right, so we've got motions first and seconds on case number 2023-0540, 2023-0485, 2023-0473, 2023-0359, 2022-0318, and 2022-0301. Any additional questions or discussions about those recommendations? All in favor of accepting the recommendations as moved and seconded, please raise your hands. All right, motion's carried, no objections, no abstentions. We will take a 7-minute break and be back at 4:05. It's come to my attention that we do have a response on the open question on case number 2023-0378. Mr. Hurler, if you could provide us with that info?
It was unclear if they had mentioned that at the very beginning for the civil rights when we got the complaint. However, they were informed of the ability to make that complaint with the Civil Rights Division when the case was closed because we provided them the same information we did in the report here. And then just to be safe, we also had someone call today and reiterate that information to the complainant.
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Hurler. Would you like to make a motion now on 2023-0378?
Yes, I'll move to accept the DIG recommendation for case number 023378.
Perfect. Second. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, no opposition, no abstention. Thank you very much. Motion carries. All right, next turning to the cases for this month from Team 1. Again, I will be reading the summaries for Team 1. There were no administrative closures for Team 1. There were also no agreements with the outcomes, so all of these will be things that Team 1 recommended adopting. First, case number 2023-0651. The allegation was that a CPD officer was using CPD computer equipment for non-CPD business. However, the investigation demonstrated that the CPD officer was actually doing continuing education on her computer for a training that was specifically related to her work, but was simply hosted by a technical college online. It was therefore within CPD policy and procedure. Those allegations were recommended to be closed as unfounded. And that we would make a recommendation, or I would entertain a motion then to recommend case number 2023-0651 in accordance with how the IG recognized those recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Next up is case number 2023-0388. This is an excessive use of force claim. In this instance, a complainant arrived to pick up her children from her sister's house. The sister was in an argument with a neighbor, and police were present. When the complainant attempted to go into the apartment building, she was asked not to continue by law enforcement while they were dealing with the argument that was happening between the sister and the neighbor. The complainant would not comply, but instead continued to enter the building at this point, and a stabbing had occurred. So presumably, the mother was trying to get in and ensure her kids were safe. However, officers were still trying to work through the allegations of the stabbing and asked her not to go in. When she didn't comply, they did end up having to take her to the ground following an amount of resistance. And officers were able to cuff her, then put her in the back of the squad car while they handled the stabbing situation aftermath. According to the IG's investigation, there was no policy violation, and the IG recommended that the case be closed as unfounded. After reviewing the report, the subcommittee agreed, and accordingly, I would entertain a motion to accept the IG's finding in case number 2023-0388 as written in the report.
So moved.
Okay. 2023-0385, there were 5 allegations in this report, including the complainant alleged that officers put a gun to the back of her son's head while he was in a police cruiser, and that her son had a seizure while he was in police custody, and that officers laid him on his back while that seizure occurred. There's also an allegation that the officer said that she wouldn't care if her son harmed himself while puking on his back. Complainant alleged that her son was intoxicated but was beaten during an interrogation room, which led to visible injuries on her son. The son also included an allegation claiming that officers did not roll down the window for him when he said he could not breathe. BWC footing, or video footage was reviewed along with a number of different reports and materials from the arrest. Evidence review did not substantiate the complaint's allegations as to the son's allegations. Those were directly disputed based on BWC footage. So none of mom's allegations were found to be substantiated. They were all found to be unfounded. And specific to the son's allegation, officers can be seen rolling down the window for him and calling a medic for him when he said he could not breathe. So officers called a medic so that he could receive a medical evaluation. Accordingly, the IG recommended that all 5 allegations be closed as unfounded. The subcommittee, after review, agreed and did not believe that there was any different finding to be found. Accordingly, I would accept a recommendation in case number, or a motion in case number 2023-0385 to accept the IG's recommendations as written.
So moved.
Second.
Got a question on that. Was it determined at all whether there was a weapon drawn at the head or no?
It said it was unfounded. There was nothing to support that allegation that he had a weapon put in the back of his head.
Okay.
Okay, next is 2023-0366. This case arose out of CPD response to a mental health crisis call. The complainant alleged that the person having the crisis would be evaluated psychologically following his arrest. The complainant alleged that officers lied in reporting such, since the jail staff informed her that no one was evaluated when booked. Evidence review did not support or otherwise substantiate the call that came in. The call in this case was anonymous, so there was nothing that actually supported the allegation that there was some falsifying about the psychological evaluation following arrest. The IG recommended that this case be closed as unfounded. Following a review, the subcommittee did not disagree with the IG's recommendation. To that end, I would entertain a motion in case number 2023-0366 to accept the IG's recommendation as written. Yes.
You guys did do that one in the earlier one from committee too, it looks like.
Was that the same number?
It's the same number, and I
Okay.
do recall the same facts as well.
All right, ignore it, please, because I don't know why we have it twice. But, okay. Let me make sure this is correct then. 2023-0347? Yes, it looks like that's right. All right, for Team 1. All right. In this case, the complainant was arrested for allegedly throwing bleach water on her neighbor. She alleged that officers discriminated and racially profiled her, that there was no warrant at the time of her arrest, and that an officer told her she'd be Breonna Tailored. Then an officer kicked her leg, dug their nails into her skin, and picked her up and drove her neck and shoulders between her thighs, and that an officer told her to shut the F up and that she shouldn't have been talking shit. Investigation followed, showing no evidence to substantiate allegations 1, 3, 4, or 5. Those were all recommended to be closed as unfounded because there's no body-worn camera footage supporting that those things were said or that they occurred. Pertaining to allegation 2, there were active warrants for the complainant's arrest. They had been obtained following initial contact with the complainant and had been issued prior to the second contact with the complainant when they returned to arrest her. It's not clear that the complainant was aware that in the interim those warrants had been issued, but they were actually issued. So that allegation is recommended to be closed as exonerated because those warrants, in fact, did exist by the time the complainant was arrested. The subcommittee reviewed the report, agreed with recommendations of unfounded for allegations 1, 3, 4, and 5, and for the recommendation of exonerated for allegation 2, I would entertain a motion accepting the IG's recommendation in case number 2023-0347. Any seconds?
Second.
Okay. Next is 2023-00. Checking to see if this one's correct. Might be 8, 9, but that might be another subcommittee's.
I don't see any double. It's 23-0089.
Okay, there it is. All right, thank you. Just double checking myself now to make sure that's right. Okay. In this case, complainant alleged that when her husband was arrested, he was tased along with other uses of force, and that he was forced to use the bathroom in the back of the police cruiser. The complainant and victim did not respond to the IG's repeated attempts at interviewing them and following up. As such, there was no evidence to support the allegation from the other sources that were viewed. And so the victim and the complainant themselves, had they been interviewed, may have been able to give additional information, but nothing that the IG was able to see supported these allegations. So the primary allegations were closed as unfounded, and then the allegation that there were other uses of forces that had been utilized were not able to be followed up on given the non-response of the parties. Subcommittee reviewed and did not come to any different conclusions. As such, I would entertain a motion accepting the IG's recommendation in case number 2023-0089.
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Thank you. All right, next up, 2023-0700. This case involved an argument with persons who were essentially taking up space in a residence without permission, a couple doors down from the complainant. The complainant alleged that an officer did not make a report and only told the person not to threaten the complainant, but did not kick them out of the apartment. 2 hours later, the complainant and the person who was taking up residence in a space unauthorized ended up in a fight. The complainant, her son, and a worker on the premises were beaten pretty severely. The investigation found out that the allegations were true, that the actions of officers violated CPD policies and procedures. This case is recommended to be forwarded to the Chief of Police, Director of Public Safety, in accordance with their process and ordering of discipline, and the IG concluded that this should be closed as sustained. As a result, I would entertain a motion to accept the IG's recommendation as written in case number 2023-0700.
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Thank you. Next up is case number 2023-0665. This complainant was a driver for Lyft and alleged that he was discriminated against during a traffic stop. The complainant alleged that the officer did not use de-escalation tactics when observing an intoxicated person being forced into the complainant's vehicle. The complainant was issued a ticket for blocking traffic and alleged that officers told him he could not do Lyft in Ohio. The investigation revealed that the officers did issue a traffic citation to the complainant after he blocked the only direction of traffic available while he, the Lyft driver, was trying to deal with an intoxicated passenger. Traffic could not get by him, and it was causing a traffic problem, and so a second cruiser was called to deal with the intoxicated passenger, but the officer who was there and present did ticket the Lyft driver for blocking traffic. Those were within CPD policies and procedures. Allegations were recommended to be closed as unfounded. The subcommittee reviewed and did not disagree. As a result, I would entertain a motion to accept the IG's recommendations as written in case number 2023-0665.
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next up is 2023-0598. This was another excessive force case. In this case, the complainant alleged excessive force following his call for officers to come handle an issue he was having with his sister-in-law. He had asked the officers to forbid his sister from coming into his house. The officer told the complainant that he was not listening to directives the officers were trying to give them. The complainant alleged the officers also told him if he asked another question, he'd be detained. The complainant alleged that he was indeed detained thereafter and was dragged across the road without shoes on to be put into a police van. When the IG did the investigation, the specific allegation that the complainant was told he'd be detained by simply asking any questions was unfounded. Instead, officers can be seen trying to de-escalate with him, who was highly agitated. He would be told he would be detained if he did not calm down and allow them to complete the investigation about the sister-in-law. His detention was within policy and procedure because it was done to allow them to complete their investigation for which they'd been called. The third allegation, that the man was dragged across the street, was not corroborated. BWC camera footage showed that he was walked and escorted to the police van. He did not have shoes on because he did not have shoes on when they arrived at the scene, and they did not pause the arrest, or pause the detention, to allow him to get shoes on. They just walked him across the street to the van until they were done. So that was recommended to be closed as exonerated. The subcommittee reviewed the report, did not have any thoughts that it should be different than stated by the IG. So I would entertain a motion to accept the IG's recommendations as written in case number 2023-0598.
So moved.
Okay. This is the last case for Team 1, 2023-0364. This complaint, the complainant alleged that officers never assist her when she calls about her son. She frequently does not feel safe with him there. Her son has, it's believed that he potentially might have some mental health issues. Officers arrived on the scene and explained that because he had not committed any crimes, they could not arrest him. The complainant alleged that officers made disparaging comments about her inability to control her son. Investigation revealed that the officers told the complainant that they could not arrest him without cause was within policy, that that was not a violation, so that allegation is exonerated. Also, the officers' comments pertaining to what alternative things could be done for her son when they gave her suggestions about what things instead of arrest could be done were within policy. The offers for assistance were not done in a rude or discourteous manner. Therefore, the IG recommends that that allegation be closed as unfounded. The subcommittee reviewed and did not disagree with the IG's findings. As such, I would entertain a motion that the IG's recommendations be adopted in case number 2023-0364.
So moved.
Any seconds? Thank you. So those are open motions and seconds on case numbers 2023-0651, 2023-0388, 2023-0385, 2023-0347, 2023-0089, 2023-0700, 2023-0665, 2023-0598, and 2023-0364. Any other questions or discussions about any of those cases? All in favor of accepting, please raise your hands. No objections, no abstentions. Thank you. Team 2.
Team 2, this is our review and report out for the October meeting. The first is going to be case number 023474. This summary is the complainant alleged the officer stopped her as she was attempting to turn into Elijah Pierce Avenue from East Long Street. The complainant stated that she drove into an accident scene and the officer stopped her and began yelling and screaming at her for driving past him. The officer made her back up out of the area, and the complainant alleges that the officer failed to de-escalate the situation. After review of the investigation, the Department Inspector General found that respect to the allegations, one of alleging that the officer stopped her and began yelling and screaming at her for driving past him, was unfounded. And allegation 2, the officer made her back up out of the area, and the officer failed to de-escalate the situation, was also unfounded. And our subcommittee, or review committee, agreed, accepts the recommendation for case number 0474. And we would move to accept.
Second.
Next is case number 0551. This complainant alleged that on a domestic violence call, the officers did not look at her body that was covered in bruises and put in the police report that they could not determine, and it was put in the police report that they could not determine the aggressor. That information in the police report resulted in making it difficult for the complainant to file charges with the Columbus City Prosecutor's Office, is what the complaint alleged. And so, just as an overview, allegation 1 was that the officers did not look at her body, which was covered in bruises, and allegation 2 that the complainant, the officers, including in the police report, that they could not determine it was an aggressor, made it difficult to file a police report. In response to both of those allegations, first, based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation, and her bruises were observed by the officers. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officers be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation 2, the investigation revealed that the officers did put in the report they could not determine the aggressor, but that was due to the complainant and her boyfriend having conflicting stories. The investigation found that actions taken by the officers were supported by CPD policy and procedure, and no misconduct was observed. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officers be closed with a finding of exonerated. And one of our questions here was about just more broadly about whether referrals were made or different opportunities were made, and that was included here, was that they were advised that they could call the prosecutor's office to press charges and get a protection order if that was something that the complainant wanted to do. Our review committee accepts the findings of unfounded for allegation 1 and exonerated for allegation 2. We would move to accept the recommendation for 551.
Second.
This is 569. The complainant alleged that the police officers left his brother-in-law, who passed away at his residence, uncovered for 3 to 4 hours until the funeral home came and picked up his body. The review of this report says that based on the information and evidence obtained, the Department Inspector General found the alleged incident happened, and the incident is supported by CPD policies, procedures, and laws. And in this particular instance, there was a call made, and then they contacted the let's make sure this is all correct here. They contacted the coroner's office, and the coroner's office advised the police officers to release the body to the funeral home. And so there was a incident here where the individual's body was uncovered because it was, one of the officers stated that sometimes coroner's office will come out if there's something suspicious, but when there's nothing suspicious, the coroner's office may not come out. And the officer stated that it was not within policy to cover the body or move the body. And the officer stated that he called the funeral home and then reached out to the coroner's office, who recommended releasing the body to the funeral home. And so in this instance, there was they found that the alleged incident occurred, but the incident itself was supported by CPD policies, procedures, and laws. Therefore, the recommendation against the allegation against the officers be closed as exonerated. And we would move to accept the recommendation for case number 569. Next, we have case number 593. This is where the complainant alleged that police officers accused him of burglary, which is harassment, and failed to provide their names and badge numbers to him when he asked for them. After review of the evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it's recommended that the allegations against the officers be closed as unfounded. And so let me see here. However, there was a sustained Department of Inspector General allegation. So just as a highlight, allegation 1 was that the officers accused him of burglary, which is harassment, but based on the information and evidence obtained, the Columbus Department Inspector General recommends the allegation against the officers be closed with a finding of unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Then there's allegation 2, which is that police officers failed to provide their names and badge numbers when asked to do so. The Department Inspector General recommends this allegation be closed with a finding of an unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. There was a sustained Department Inspector General allegation against one of the officers because the information reviewed provided evidence that one of the officers used profanity towards the complainant in violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with sustained because of the use of profanity in this case, 593. And we accept the recommendations of the Department of Inspector General for case number 593. Yes, that's a motion. That's my motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Case number 602, the complainant alleged her vehicle was hit from behind near Livingston and Nelson. The officers did not ticket the person, but stated the insurance company would figure out who was in the right or wrong. The complainant also alleged she had a witness present who stated she observed the officers posing for selfies at the scene. According to the first allegation related to the insurance company, the officer saying the insurance company would be figuring out who was in the right or wrong, the investigation revealed that the officers operated within policy to only have the parties exchange insurance information and are not required to issue any citations. Therefore, it's recommended this allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated for both officers. Allegation 2, that the person, that there was a witness present at this accident who stated the officers were posing for selfies at the scene with the individual who hit her car. The Columbus Department Inspector General was able to conduct an interview with this witness. An interview revealed the witness observed the young lady who hit the complainant's car standing next to the officer's vehicle and posing for selfies. The witness clarified she did not state the officers were posing and taking photos with the woman at the scene. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded for both officers. We would move to accept the findings of unfounded the finding of exonerated for allegation 1 and unfounded for allegation 2 in case number 0602.
I have a question.
Yep.
When I was looking at this particular case, so there's no longer a policy for people to, if their insurance companies don't want police reports anymore? Because if they're just going to exchange information and no police report was taken, I'm kind of baffled by that.
Yeah, that is, I don't know. That was one of the points, and thank you for bringing that up. I have that here. The question about what the policy is, if this is a separate situation or if there's a circumstance that rises to the level where there does need to be something filed. Just had a question there.
Maybe during 2020, the policy was changed to say if there's no injury,
Okay.
then there doesn't have to be a filing. But if there are injuries, then there should accompany a police report with those
I just want some
incidents.
clarification on that.
And
Yep.
the policy does lay out in what instances a police report would be done. It specifically states death or injury, hit, skip, no operator's license, reckless operation, impairment of an operator due to alcohol or drugs, damage of city-owned vehicles, school bus, hazardous material, or disabling, where a vehicle has to be towed out of the roadway, disturbances between the involved parties, and the need for traffic control on the roadway.
All right.
Got it.
Just wanted to get some clarity.
Thank
Remember, you made a sustained allegation for the report I had because that officer didn't take the report and that person was in fact injured.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You looking out, man. I appreciate it.
Okay.
It's got a
And
good
did we get a second on that? I know we got a, thank you.
We did now? 664, the complainant, this is an incident in which the complainant stated she was making a complaint against an officer in his ignorance as he was in her face and yelling at her. She alleged he talked to her, quote, like she's a slave and he was her master, end quote. The Department of Inspector General's investigation consisted of a review of the body-worn camera footage, an interview with the complainant, and an interview with the officer. The investigation revealed the officers responded and provided assistance to a complainant according to CPD policy and procedures. At no time was the officer observed getting into the complainant's face or yelling at her as alleged by the complaint. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Our review committee agreed accepts the finding of the Inspector General for case number 664 as unfounded for this case. That's our motion. If it works like that. Thank you. Case number 667, the complainant stated she called police 6 different times sorry, I want to make sure. 6 different times to get a person removed from her house after he had assaulted her. She stated that she is going to the prosecutor's office because she feels that the officers are not doing anything. Also, she alleged that the officers yelled at her. According to allegation 1, there was no evidence to substantiate the complaint's allegation that assistance was not provided. A review of the body-worn camera footage revealed officers were called 4 times by the complainant, and when the officers responded, their actions were supported by CVD policy and procedures. The 3rd time the officers responded, due to her stating she was physically hit, officers made the man leave the residence. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. For allegation 2, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complaint's allegation that the officers yelled at her. A review of the body-worn camera footage found that at no time did any officer yell at the complainant. Therefore, it's recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. However, there was a sustained Department of Inspector General allegation, which revealed that during an interaction with the complainant, one of the officers did refer to the man in the home, parentheses, while speaking to the complainant, in parentheses, as a drunk a-hole, which is a violation of CPD policy stating officers should not use profanity. Therefore, it is recommended a finding of sustained against the officer as this action violated CPD policy and procedures. And then based on these findings, recommended that the investigation report be forwarded to the Chief of Police, CPD, for a review and consideration of any disciplinary action in accordance with CPD policies and procedures, collective bargaining, and the collective bargaining agreement. Our review committee accepts the finding from the Department of Inspector General for case number 667 and would move to accept the recommendation.
May I have a second? Thank you.
Next, we have case number 0672. The complainant alleges her daughter was driving through a car wash when her vehicle was struck from behind by another vehicle. Officers were called to the scene, and while the complainant was speaking with an officer, he told her she was an effing liar. So according to the allegations here, the investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation the officer used profanity and exhibited unprofessional behavior during his interaction with the complainant on May 23rd, 2023, and the officer's actions violated CPD policies, procedures, and/or law. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officer be closed with a finding of sustained. I think it's important here to note that it's not just the use of profanity, but it's also the allegation of the officer exhibiting unprofessional behavior during his interaction. So in addition to the officer saying, she was an effing liar, the officer also exhibited unprofessional behavior because he made problematic and disparaging statements about the Linden neighborhood, specifically a review of the body-worn camera footage for one of the officers during his interaction with the driver stated, quote, "This is where everyone gets murdered in this city. This is Linden, and I'm not even remotely surprised if someone in this S-hole would get mad at you or multiple people showed up," end quote. And then when the officer, when the footage was shown saying, "You're an effing liar," in an interview, the officer told the Columbus Department Inspector General, quote, "I did cuss," end quote. I did not say, quote, "You're an effing liar," but said, "You're effing lying to me," while he was speaking with the complainant. Our review committee agreed and accepts the finding of the Inspector General for this case of sustained for the use of profanity and the unprofessional behavior during his interaction with the complainant. For case number 672, and I don't know if any of our review committee members has additional comments.
I do have additional. I took exception to the remarks that he made in reference to the Linden community because I serve the Linden community. My church sits right at the heart of the Linden community, and I take total exception to what he said. And I think that was very non-becoming of an officer representing the city of Columbus.
Thank you, Board Member Tatum. So our review committee would sustain the finding both for the profanity and for the misconduct. And part of that is then to forward along the recommendations to the police chief, CPD, for review and disciplinary actions in accordance with CPD policies and procedures and the collective bargaining agreement between City of Columbus and Fraternal Order of Police. And so that would be my recommendation for case
Your
number
motion.
062. Motion.
Yes, all right, it's been motion, second.
Thank you for that. Case number 70703, complainant alleged her son, age 16, and daughter, age 14, were accused of shoplifting and were taken to the security office. The complainant stated that she was never contacted, and both children were questioned without a parent present. Also, the mother stated her daughter was searched by a male officer during the search, and altercation ensued between the officer and her other daughter, age 17. During this time, that officer allegedly took the daughter's cell phone and slammed it into the ground, causing damage. Lastly, the mother stated the officer roughed up the 16-year-old son. According to the analysis and findings here, related to allegation 1, the body-worn camera footage revealed that her daughter was searched by a male officer, and 2 additional female officers did conduct a pat-down search on the 2 female subjects prior to placing them in their cruisers. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate this allegation by the complainant, which was this was the allegation made. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded, as there was no evidence that found that one of the officers, the male officers, conducted a search of the female or any subject. Also, there was no finding of violation of CPD policies and procedures. And just a quick kind of background on what was happening there, there was an accusation of shoplifting, and then one of the officers brought them into the store's kind of loss prevention area of the store. We'll say, though, the main officer here was on special duty, so there wasn't the body-worn camera footage from that officer, but there was footage from the store as well as footage from the 2 additional female CPD officers here. Related to the damaged phone, the detective admitted taking the cell phone from the 15-year-old subject and tossing it while attempting to place handcuffs on the subject, but he also confirmed the cell phone had no damage when he gave it to the grandmother who picked up the subjects from the store. Department Inspector General was unable to follow up regarding this allegation, and the complainant provided no additional information to support this allegation. They made several attempts, but never showed up to schedule an interview, never called to reschedule another interview, and did not return any requested follow-up by the office. So yet again, another example more broadly about when people know that this is their chance to either respond with the Department Inspector General as well as to potentially hear their case when it's being reviewed by the Civilian Review Board. So that was unfounded. And then allegation 3 regarding the allegation of roughing her son up, that was no evidence found to substantiate that the officer roughed up the 15-year-old subject. And so those allegations are also unfounded. And so the our review committee accepts the allegation, or accepts the recommendation from the Department Inspector General, and would move to accept in case number 0703.
May I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Ward.
And so there is a case number here, and I kind of jumped over it, but I'll mention why. It's case number 0589. Our review committee accepts in part and disagrees in part with the Department Inspector General recommendation, and we'll talk a little bit about this here. The complainant, and I'm just going to read this one out a little quicker here. This is an incident where a complainant alleges that the chief of police and first assistant chief attended a press conference on Saturday, May 6, 2023, wearing clothes that violates the CBD uniform and appearance directive in, quote, multiple ways. The complainant further alleged both were wearing a standard issue patrol uniform, jacket, and blue jeans. The chief specifically was wearing ripped blue jeans. The Inspector General reviewed the images received from the complainant in the press conference and questioned CBD directives. They also interviewed the chief of police and determined the directive does not address wearing uniform parts with denim, specifically the police winter jacket. In addition, the Department Inspector General concluded the directive states under Section N, Paragraph 2, quote, deviation from this dress code requires the approval of the affected employee's bureau commander/manager, end quote. The chief of police stated in her statement that she authorized anyone responding to this type of incident from home and where they were not on duty, as she is more concerned with them responding, providing assistance than with what they are wearing. The Department Inspector General recommends allegation 1 against the chief and the first assistant chief be closed unfounded, and allegation 2 against the chief be closed unfounded, as the chief of police authorized for the wear of the jeans when responding to this type of incident from home and not on duty. However, the Columbus Department Inspector General determined that while the chief of police authorized those on scene to wear denim, she herself was not in compliance with Section 1, Paragraph 1A, which states, quote, unless an uniform or business casual attire has been approved, division personnel shall wear traditional business attire, such as suit or dress, when appearing in court or interacting with the public. And that was that's a sustained DIG allegation where the chief was found to be outside the CBD directive when addressing the public and not in uniform or business attire, although this was done in an effort to remain transparent. Our review committee accepts the recommendations of exonerated for allegations 1 and 2. However, we disagree with the sustained Department of Inspector General allegation. And the reason being here is that the recommendation of a sustained DIG allegation seems inconsistent with the findings from allegations 1 and 2, where the Department of Inspector General determined that the officers were exonerated. And so we would disagree with the finding and would reject the DIG allegation of sustain. And I don't know if our
You have
review
to
committee.
substitute, what would you make what would your subcommittee recommend?
We exonerate. I mean, we would recommend exonerated just as 1 and 2 for.
It seems like to be contradictory of one another. You know, when she's the one who has already authorized them to be, you know, in street clothes if they're coming straight from home when they're off duty, coming straight from home.
Yeah.
Or, you know, someplace else.
Yeah, and if it is subject to approval from the police chief or the manager, and when you're the police chief, so we would just reject the DIG allegation. But do we have to do an exonerated piece?
I don't
or
think we
just
can
reject?
actually just reject.
I mean, why not?
Well, because our past practice has been if we disagree, then we instead put our own recommendation on that allegation instead of just saying, like, we can't order it to be
But I don't know if we've
deleted.
done that for a DIG sustain. Well, I don't know if we've ever done that for a DIG allegation that was added.
I think you don't have to like disagree and then recommend something else if you don't
Got it.
want
Okay.
to.
Got
If
it.
you don't want to, right? I mean, you may just disagree.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
saying.
and I think we also discussed that you could ask the DIG to do additional follow-up if there's other questions that you have.
No
Or
questions.
investigate further, but.
I feel like it's a gap in policy, right? Like, she is authorized to allow staff to wear different clothing, but there's no one in the chain of command to authorize her to wear different clothing. So I'm not,
Yeah.
I just wanted to
I
make
would,
sure
ju-
we
well,
were doing
I
it
don't need to
right.
say exonerate or anything like that. I would just disagree with the allegation
Okay.
for the DIG allegation here. I would disagree.
Perfect.
Kind of implicit that the authorizer would authorize herself. I mean, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it would seem to me that's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's what it seems to me. You know, if you authorize officers that they are able to, she's an officer, if they are able to come from home being off duty to go to a scene in street clothing, or if they're, like she was, I think they were at a concert or something, and they came, when she got the call, they left straight from the concert and went to the scene. You know, it seems to me that that would be appropriate for her to do so as well. You know,
Yeah.
showing more concern about what's going on at the scene than worrying about what she's dressed in.
So I do think part of this, though, it is recommended that it's forwarded to the both Columbus Director of Public Safety and the Police Chief. Obviously, in these instances, I know in allegations against the Police Chief or the Assistant Chief, it maybe just goes to the Safety Director. But,
Ultimately,
yeah.
it's your decision what to do with it. You could just make a motion to disagree with the finding and to close the complaint.
Yeah, so that's our motion. So we disagree with the DIG finding and allegation, and for the sustained DIG finding for 589.
And that was on the IG's allegation, right?
Yes.
So technically, that would have to be two. So the first
I'll
two
make
are
it-
the ones
yeah,
that were originally.
To accept make a motion to accept the DIG allegation for 1 and 2
Allegations 1 and 2.
of exonerated. So that's my motion.
Okay, can I have a second?
And then,
Yes.
I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make a point of clarification here. The concern in that DIG allegation was not that the chief had not authorized herself to wear that. The concern was specifically in that policy where it does state when they're interacting with the public that they would have to be in either business, uniform, business casual attire or business attire. That was the reason for that. So it wasn't an issue up until she had decided to interact with the public. And in that interaction with the public, we didn't see any exception to those clothing items.
well, and what about the part that says unless in uniform or business casual attire has been approved?
Correct, but I don't believe that business casual attire would be jeans. That was our interpretation.
Okay.
And is the distinction between the press conference that she had authorized folks to show up wearing what they were wearing versus as soon as the conference was over, she walks over and talks to people who have questions, and that's where her violation came?
We would say
Or-
that the interaction would be the professional interaction she had, where she interacted by having that press
Okay.
conference.
Well-
Given that clarification, would the subcommittee like to make a recommendation of policy change?
Yeah, I mean,
regarding-
might be useful to take a look at the policy. I mean, I would
Okay.
still disagree with adding that
Abs-
finding.
Absolutely, but
Yeah.
this potentially could be repeated, right? If we don't recommend that they allow the chief to also be able to take a step off and have a conversation with the public after
I think we have to
those
give a
incidents.
recommendation of some discretion there.
Or I think what we can do, we cannot recommend discretion, we have to recommend a policy review
I
or a
think that there needs
change.
to be a policy review, because in this particular instance, I think she's caught between a rock and a hard place. If she doesn't say anything, then she's not doing her job. Then if she does say something, now all of a sudden, you know, they're worrying about what she's got to wear, what she's wearing, you know, and I think that the most important thing, and I think she kind of stated it herself when she talked about the dress attire, she's more concerned about getting to the scene than her people getting to the scene than she is about, you know, worrying about what they have on. So I think that a policy change,
You can agree with the DIG's finding, recommend no discipline, and a reexamination of the policy as applied to the chief. or
Yeah,
as
I wouldn't.
applied.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. And I wouldn't even. I wouldn't even necessarily agree with the finding. I don't know enough in terms about the approval situation. I mean, the business casual. If jeans don't count as business casual, and you're for it. So, but to me, it did not seem to be a particular instance here. So I would just. But I wouldn't say exonerated or anything. I just would disagree with the finding. It's my motion.
and seek for policy change.
Yeah, and take a
Recommend
well,
policy
take a look,
change.
take a review of the policy here. I mean, we could also hold on this if folks want to look into it some more. I don't think it's dispositive.
I don't think you have to.
Yeah.
I think if you want to put those two things together in one motion, the motion would be reject the finding that there was a sustained violation of policy, but also review the policy
Yeah.
that would not allow the chief to have the same clothing benefit that she's able to give her direct reports.
Thanks for that motion.
Okay, can I have a second?
I would accept.
All right. Okay, so we have open motions on the floor for case number 23-0474, 23-0551, 23-0569, 23-0593, 23-0602, 23-0664, 23-0667, 23-0672, 23-0703, and also the original allegations in 23-0589, where the subcommittee reviewed and agreed with those recommendations. Those motions are open. All in favor, please raise your hands. Motion carries, no opposition, no abstentions. And then we also have a disagreement on the additional allegation added by the IG in case number 23-0589, where the subcommittee recommends, one, not adopting that recommendation, but instead forwarding on a policy review regarding the chief's discretion as it relates to business casual clothing in instances where she has the authority to grant that to direct reports. All in favor of recommending that review, please raise your hands. No opposition, no abstentions. Thank you. All those motions carry.
As long as we have those same considerations for those below the chief.
Well, that's what
So
she was saying.
yeah, we got to remember that, though, when that case comes up,
Yes.
and the officer is violating a policy for the greater good, then we have to be able to stop and say,
Agreed, yeah.
okay,
A full-scale policy review across the board.
Well, that's section N, paragraph 2. That's what she said. Section N, paragraph 2, right? It says, deviation from this dress code requires the approval of the affected employee's bureau commander and manager. Chief of Police stated in her statement that she authorized anyone responding to this type of incident from home and where they are not on duty, as she is more concerned about them responding and providing assistance than that with what they're wearing. She said that.
All right, Subcommittee 3, is there any report that you believe we can cover in the last 4 minutes?
all of them.
All of them?
Because, come on.
All right, turning it over to you.
We got to do some overtime or something, because
Oh, Lord.
I'm not taking this home. I'm not.
Case number 23-0445. On April 12, 2023, the Columbus Department of the DIG was forwarded a complaint from Columbus Division of Police. The complaint alleged that CPD officers did not handle a call appropriately when they were asked to assist Columbus Fire Department personnel, as they had discovered a firearm with the patient. When the officers arrived, the allegation was that when the officers arrived, they rushed to make the call for service, a medical run, causing the medics to have to transport the individual to the hospital, who may not have had otherwise required further medical attention. The DIG investigated, and their investigation consisted of a review of the complaint, a review of the BWC, an interview with the medic familiar with the situation and all the involved officers, to determine if the officers' actions on the scene were in accordance with CPD policy and procedure. Their investigation was very extensive. The investigation found no evidence that indicated that the officers at the scene rushed to make this call a medical run, or that this call was not handled within CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that the complaint be closed with a finding of unfounded. Officer H did not handle the call for assistance by CPD. The allegation was that he did not handle the call by CFD appropriately by rushing it to make it a medical run. The call for service was a medical run from the very beginning, and Officer H was called to assist because they found a knife, which he did in accordance with CPD Division Directive 2.02 and 4.09. Therefore, it is recommended that the complaint be closed as unfounded. Our review committee concurred with this. We move to accept the findings of the DIG at this time as to case number 2023-0445.
All right, anybody have any questions or discussion about this case? No, all in favor of accepting the motion, please raise your hands. Mary, you too?
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any opposition, no abstention, motion carries. Thank you all, I will be respectful of time, and I will say, Team 3, you can go first, and not only this month, so sorry, Mac. You can go first with this month's case, but also if you all want to be prepared to do all your cases at the beginning of our next meeting.
Chair, we would request that the starting order be rotated.
We can do that as well. So all of Team 3 can go first, both this month and the next, at our next CRB meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Second, all in favor, please raise your hands. So adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Hey, Scott.